I always ask when I talk to my friends that are journalists, I said, look, when you guys go for these press conferences, what do we really ask these guys? Do we tell them to show us or do we demand the data? More often than not, you find out that the journalists will demand the data. And the minister might make a statement that we'll get back to you. You can't come to a press conference and tell us that you'll get back to us on something that is the topic of the week.
My name is Jide Pratt.
I would like you to give us an overview of what you do at Iona and trade grid activity in the energy sector.
Thanks for talking to me, Brian. Iona was a company that was set up about 30 years. And the plan then was to basically stay in the brand management space. As time went on, Mr. Onobabiro, who was the founder, decided, look, JP, let's work together on seeing what we can do in terms of lights. So that was where the partnership, let me say, diversified into the energy space. And one of the things we tried to do was that we found out that we didn't believe there was a need for public lighting to be taking power from the grid, especially when we knew that the grid didn't have enough supply. So we started making LED lights. And LED lights, as we all know, while they emit a lot of brightness or let me say luminosity, they actually conserve very little power. That led us into energy management. I said, okay, how do we move forward? Let's start making solar lights. If you look at Nigeria as a country, you find that abundance of sun is there. So let's make solar lights. We tried making it in Nigeria. Had a few, let me say, drawbacks in terms of backward integration, and decided, okay, let's go into China, see what we can do. So we developed a patent that was ours. I went out and started manufacturing and breaking it. What does that help us do? It's helped us to go into places where you have environments that need light, and they can do it totally off-grid. We've now started the process of getting into home inverter systems as well. We've done a few. We haven't scaled yet, but that's the next point. So that's what Iona is doing in that space with respect to energy. Now, trade grid, when we started, the term subsidy is gone was the first bullet and jolt. So we said, okay, subsidy is gone. The price of petroleum products, particularly PMS, had tripled. So we found that a lot of dealers could no longer buy full trucks. So we started what we called an ultra PLP model, where we said that we'll take a full truck, split it into three based on the compartments, and then we'll fund that transaction by giving products to the dealers to sell and pay to the trade grid wallet on a daily basis. We started that and found that the opportunity also presented itself for doing that by funding transactions on the retail space for gas oil as well. As time went on, we also found out that, look, what more can we do? We had over 2,500 people on our platform, the TradeGrid app. And now said, okay, what are other ways we can actually, do something different apart from what we started as traditionally bulky transactions together? We were aggregating the transactions and finding ways to finance people based on what we called the Ultra PLP. But now I said, okay, let's also look at this from another perspective. Power management will be a problem at retail outlets. A lot of them were burning diesel. And we said, okay, let's use the solar, which we called PLP, TradeGrid Plus, sorry. What did the TradeGrid Plus do? It gave people an avenue to use energy as a service. So we come into your station, evaluate what your station's needs are in terms of power and capacity. And then based on that, the next thing we're able to do is say, okay, we'll bring in an inverter system, cutting your diesel cost and also cutting your, let me say, band A cost. So that you pay for this energy as a service, and we should pilot in about another 2 to 3 weeks with the first set of outlets. Then we'll roll it out and begin to grow that, so that way will also help in the power management space. TradeGrid is also looking at how we open portals to start international trade at a certain time. But right now, the focus for us is still Nigeria and Kenya, where we have operations running. So in a nutshell, that's where we are for a start to terms of Iona and TradeGrid.
What does PLP mean?
Now, so PLP, when we started, it was a product lease program. So that term PLP was that. Why did we call it the product list? Because like I said, we'll give you the product in compartments. And with every day you sell, you actually pay back into the TradeRead wallet. You don't make any upfront payments. As long as we've done a KYC, I say this particular station can do, let's say, 5,000 liters a day. Then what we'll give you is 11,000 liters. So that by day one, you've made payment, day two, you've made payment. And the aim is to make it by 3 to 5 days. So that's why we call it PLP, Product Lease Program.
So from there, I would like to take us to the country's energy security situation. How far will you say Nigeria has come, in terms of the overall energy security, oil and gas, power, renewables, all encompassing?
In my opinion, I don't think we've come as long as we should. It goes without saying that power has been unreliable in Nigeria for a long time. So when you talk about power security or energy security, you're talking about availability. You're talking about the affordability. It's not been available for a long period of time. The movement to band A and no band A means it's not been affordable for a lot of people who feel that they are misaligned or misgrouped. So the point is this. What are the quick wins that we need to try and intensify? We need to be looking at things like, if I have a small house and I do not need to be on the grid, then there should be solutions for small inverter kits, power units that power my fan. I can recharge, listen to my radio or TV, but it has to be more of energy as a service as against acquisition. The cost of acquiring these items, because we do not buy them, we do not manufacture them local. It means that there's an exchange rate imbalance that affects that. If the earning power is low, then there must be flexible ways of getting people on a pay-as-you-go basis, more or less. That helps the energy security. Because what it means is that we have people who can't afford, because we don't forget, we talked about it being available, it being accessible, and it being affordable. That way you solve the issue of affordability, you solve the issue of availability, but it needs a lot of development financing has to go into that so that the cost of those payments are not, let me say, restricted.
So I'll still stick with you on power before we move to oil and gas. So for power, we've seen the development that we'll be having in last month, and just yesterday, the Minister of Power was saying that the country recorded 5,105 megawatts. But a look at the system operators data shows that that's not the figure. You're right, the corporate figure was 4,900 thereabout. So is it a case of transparency in the ministry or some sort of miscommunication somewhere?
Miscommunication is not what I would use. And I say this, data is life. So what you don't measure, you can't put a figure out on it. So let's start with the Ministry of Power giving us a figure. If the Ministry of Power gives a figure and says, this is what is installed, this is what is generated, and this is what is transmitted, there must be something that captures that data that you could show to the press or the public and say, these are the meter readings based on this time. It's not right to put out a statement that is incorrect, and then we're just doing it to create a narrative. If we say we got into 5,000, was that what was generated? Was that what was transmitted? Because in that same period, let's not forget that there was a power grid shutout. While there's some technical issues around why a grid shuts down, but it means that we have barely moved away from 4,000, 5,000 as a nation of 200 million people. So I don't think it's a miscommunication. I think we're pandering figures that we're not accountable for. What is the solution? The Ministry of Power Resources by now should have a link on their website that clearly shows you what is coming out, what is going in, and what it is at any given time. NISO as its own also must have that. So these two figures must align if the basis of the measurements are the same. Back to data. So, I mean, that's what I would say about that.
Okay, so I would just stick on the issue of transparency. So some months back, the Minister of Power said that we're projecting some billions of naira to metered Band A customers, and that scheme was to be, finalized by the end of September. This is August 9th, and we've not heard developments. This is what we've done. This is what we are yet to do. So how do we know that we are progressing?
It goes back to what I said about what you can't measure. You have no idea of knowing what it is. So let's start from the beginning. A certain amount of money was budgeted, and it came out as news that, look, this is going to help unmetered Band A customers. So what the minister was thinking about is that if these are the people that are paying the highest for power, then there should be no confusion about what they use. Now, that's noble. But you see, at that point in time, what I expected from that community, and I kept on asking a few people who are power industry experts, look, how many meters do you think this amount of money is actually going to purchase? And they kept on saying, no, it's not about the number. I said, sorry, it is about the number. So if we say that and we have 10 billion, what is the unit cost of 1 meter, depending on whether it's a single phase, double phase, or not? That's when you now say that in this period, this is the gap. If we say the gap is 12 million, then what it means is that we should say in month 1, we're expecting, because we're importing most of these people, they're not being locally made. If the freight time from wherever it is 1 or 2 months, then ignore month 1 or month 2. But at the end of the 30 days on month 3, you should tell us this is the number of meters that have been installed in these particular places. Month 2, the same thing. So what that means is that we're getting closer and closer to the target of September. And we can automatically see the data that says this is the gap. And then someone in that ministry has the responsibility to say, okay, this is the gap. This is why there's a delta on this. And this is the cover-up plan. But short of that, and I always ask when I talk to my friends that are journalists, I said, look, when you guys go for these press conferences, what do we really ask these guys? Do we tell them to show us or do we demand the data? More often than not, you find out that the journalists will demand the data and the minister might make a statement and say, we'll get back to you. You can't come to a press conference and tell us that you'll get back to us on something that is the topic of the day. So back to data. I'm not so sure we're on track. And sadly, it pains me that I can't even go to a website or go to the data filing and say that, look, okay, this is the delta. So back to transparency, we're not doing as well. And it's because we're not sharing data as at when. That's really the issue.
What are the future prospects of Nigerian power sector? Are we going to have one collapse for the national grid? What do you think we should do in terms of mini grid, renewables, and taking the pressure off the national grid?
So to be frank, I think that we had struggled with an issue of central power in terms of generation and distribution for quite a while. I think that the initial move where we decided to privatize some parts of that chain was a very good move. But sadly, I think they held on to the part that they shouldn't have held on to. So if you notice, generation and distribution were privatized. There's a lot of conversation around the fact that they were well managed. We forget the fact that they were also leveraged because power was sold at a price that wasn't commercial. So it meant that there were legacy payments that had to be made, be it on the generation side and the transmission and the distribution side. Now, what was in the middle of that chain was transmission. Transmission was held by the federal government. So it now meant that you want a system to transform for accountability and to be able to move from public funding or public managing to private, but you held the middle part. So the effect of holding that middle part is that on the generation side and on the distribution side, while they had a responsibility to measure what they sold, the fact that there were still drawback payments that were not coming out at when due left them exposed. What is the way forward? We've gotten around to saying that, look, this can't work continuously on this central basis, so let's try and decentralize. There's a lot of talk of renewable energy. Why we talk about renewable energy? Because it's a way around getting some of these power issues solved. Smaller manageable units, which is why you used to term mini grids.
So we begin to do it at different points to power different units and take pressure off the grid while we try to increase it. But to do that, REA seems to be doing quite a lot in this regard, and we must commend them. In Nigeria, we have so many problems, but more often than not, I always believe we're not solving them. That's why I've had up NEPA for 50 years, 4 queues over 50 years old. If you look at it that what the REA is doing is going to rural areas and electrifying them, that's fine. You have people like, I believe, Solar Africa, Power for Africa. These are companies that are getting and bringing in large grants to do the same as well. What I still think is missing to be able to accelerate is that we're still not backward integrated. So if I'm going to put in a mini grid into place, I'm going to use solar panels. I'm going to use inverters. I'm going to use batteries. None of those three things I've mentioned are made in Nigeria. What is even worse is that you hardly find somewhere in West Africa, and I'm speaking West Africa specifically, not South Africa yet, where they manufacture these things. Companies like Oxano have been able to build up a factory now where they're not manufacturing those solar panels, and let's be clear. But what they're doing is a case of CKD, completely knocked down or semi-knocked down. So they come and assemble those things here. It's a massive step, but we must go one step further. To ensure that the full dividends of renewable energy growth happens in Nigeria, we need to backward integrate. Iona as a company, it pains us every time we have to go to a factory in China, even though we have our patent, and make those lights there, and then ship them in. If we had all the elements we need here, we've got lithium in Nigeria. Why aren't we making batteries yet? Nasarawa has done some groundbreaking in that regard. So they've brought in a company to come and help them backward integrate. Positive step. But this is still going to take us a few years to get there. The renewable energy drive is something that is still expensive today. And as technology gets better, the prices will drop. But we must not forget that that supply chain is entirely out of our control because we're not manufacturing here. Many grids have a way to go, but one positive we must also add is find a way to backward integrate so that we can manufacture some of this components.
So literally backward integration is the way to go. Our popularity in the future.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take it to oil and gas now. So my question back to you now would be that has NNPC ever been transparent? Why from corporation to company? Given all the things that has happened in the last weeks, from Dangote stake or owning a stake in the refinery of Dangote to the subsidiaries, you not being able to have access to the data about the subsidiaries, to every other thing that you can think of.
I mean, my first answer straight off is no. I don't believe that NNPC has ever been fully transparent. And I use the word fully because they give information to who they need to, not who they think needs it. So NNPC was always government run. So they give information to the government. But the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as an entity, who technically are stakeholders, in my opinion, don't get any information. The Senate committees, in terms of the legislative arms of government, ask for it. But it's evident in the arrogance. And why do I use the word arrogance? It's evident in the arrogance when you hear people like Mele Kyari say that we'll give you this information at the appropriate time. What does that mean? NNPC hasn't been transparent for a long period and won't be the way they are currently set up. If you look at what the PIA stated in terms of where we should go after deregulation, NNPC by effluxion was supposed to become a limited company. That has happened by name, but it hasn't happened by corporate governance standards or by design. This is where I'm going. If the Ministry of Finance Incorporated and the Ministry of Petroleum Resources own 100% shares, it is still government owned. Now, while MOFI is set up as, and let me say, an asset manager, I'm not so sure that the board has been diluted enough to increase the level of corporate governance to make NNPC transparent. You have 21 operating companies. And I dare say that I doubt if up to 10 are profitable. It will be good to know this and be able to discuss this in detail. But out of those 21, I can't remember seeing the published audited accounts of any one of those people. We saw NNPC's last maybe a year or 2 years ago where they kept on making noise about how they made profit. Now, I said that to say this.
Saudi Aramco is the most profitable oil and gas company in the world. It's government owned. So what it does mean is that while the world might say that corporate governance is the best way around it, public private sector participation, Saudi Aramco has disproven that theory. But in disproving that theory, they've also said that, look, if we want to run something as government, nobody can beat Saudi Arabia. And that's the testament. Can NNPC say the answer is no? Back to transparency, because we don't know what they spent. Look at something as simple as subsidy. Subsidy came about when we said that, look, we have zero refining capacity. NNPC as an entity has not been able to fix any refinery. I read a statement recently when the former president Obasanjo said that they offered Shell to come and take some of the refineries and run. And Shell said no because of how badly managed it was. So it means that as an entity, you've generated revenue. So if you've generated revenue, you've not been accountable for how it's been spent. And because you're not accountable, you continue to mismanage it. And because nobody puts you in check, that transparency is not going to grow. The president is the Minister of Petroleum Resources. And in my opinion, he needs to sort out the anomalies. Transparency in NNPC has to happen. And to happen, I believe personally, they need to dilute their shares. They need to dilute their shares so that some private sector participation comes into it. If it was working the way Saudi Aramco was working, then I'll say you don't change the winning formula. But it's not, and it's not for over decades. So the president really knows what he needs to do, which I believe he does in his wisdom. I would say it's time to shape up that board composition from an equity point of view and from a management point of view. Those are the only things that are going to drive transparency. It's important to say you have a top head in the NNPC who technically can shift it. There's Madam Iyeson, top veteran, professional, understands gas, has a brilliant rapport with IOCs. And the question I wonder is that if I'm looking for how to change something that's not going well, don't I need a face that is amiable, accessible, knowledgeable, and is privileged to have so much experience in international IOCs? While they're what they are, they get corporate governance right. In my opinion, those are the first things we need to do to begin to bring the transparency. But the leadership as it is, in my opinion, has got to their best by date.
The FG from the president himself to Wale Edun as the minister in charge of the economy, to even the chief of Navy in the country, has said that Nigeria average production is 1.6 million barrels. But if you look at the AEPRC's data, if you are excluding condensates, Nigeria is not doing even up to 1.4.
Yeah.
Now, if you had condensate, Nigeria only did 1.64 in January 2024.
Correct.
Now, if you go to OPEC does not count condensate.
Yeah.
So you only work with crude oil, which puts our figures at 1.3, 1.34, thereabout. So is that not a case of misinformation from the government side of things?
I mean, there are no half answers to this. The answer is yes. The intention might be to try and sell a narrative that says that we're recovering stolen crude. But you see, if you sell a narrative, you need to back it up again by data. If I wanted to check what Nigeria was producing, and like you rightly alluded, I'm unlikely going to go to the NDPRC. Because for me, the data isn't published as and when. I'd rather go to the OPEC website. So for someone to come out, the CNS has a deep understanding of the security architecture around the waterways in Nigeria. That's fine. There are terminals that are actually metered. But the CNS can't be the one to tell me what Nigeria is producing. I'm sorry, with all due respect, it's not in this place. He can tell us the shut-ins and the recoveries that are being done across the waters of Nigeria because he has the manpower and I believe he has the data. But it goes back to the NUPRC as a regulator. How do you confuse the nation by saying that this is what you're producing? When you know from your flow stations, this is not what you're producing. It's irresponsible. While Nigerians can deal with this, what we forget is that there are foreign companies who are also looking at this data. And they're looking at it for two reasons. Is there an inroad
into an investment in Nigeria. If there is an inroad, what is this projected cash flow to turn around my investment and in what period of time? So if those data are confusing, is it by error? Is it by omission? Is it by commission? What it means is that it dissuades them from looking at Nigeria as a primary place to go because we can't measure our code. It's laughable. So recently we heard about, I think it was Total that went to Angola with a $5 billion investment.
Yeah.
Prior to that, we had heard the president of Total Africa say how we have a lot of conversations in Nigeria, but we don't move past conversations. So what it means now is that investment is shifting from Nigeria to other countries because the return on the capital, there is a pathway to it. I have a friend who does a lot of upstream business, and he moved some of his equipment to Uganda. And I kept on asking, Ross, Uganda, how big? He says it's not the size, it's the predictability on his return on investment. If they tell me they'll pay me by 30 days, they'll pay me by 30 days. So I'm going to have those small contracts, sweat my assets, but I'm getting paid. So I can manage my cash flows and I can manage more investment. He said, sadly, he had the problem where 4 or 5 years he hadn't been paid. I spoke to someone else on the forum that I believe you manage, who was in upstream as well, upstream services, I believe you, Staneka. And they said he hadn't been paid for some transactions for 4 years. These things have major implications on us as a country and the willingness and ability of people to bring in new funds into the oil and gas sector. That's why it's been underfunded and underdeveloped for over a decade and a half. Who is going to bail the cat?
So will you say it's a case of political will or internal jeopardization from the government and other stakeholders involved?
I think it's more of that political will. Kofi says that we should always begin with the end in mind. And what I've found out is that in Nigeria, there's no end in mind as a collective. There's an end in mind for people as individuals, from executive to legislative. I go back again to why I said that. Mr. Melikeri is one of the most knowledgeable people in downstream, midstream, or upstream oil and gas. So it's not the knowledge that is lacking. It's the will to do the right thing. Now, if you're not doing the right thing, then the question is this: what are you doing and why are you doing it? So if you're not doing the right thing, you're doing the wrong thing, maybe because what's in it for me is what drives it. If we know what to do and I've decided not to do it for this long, then the political will to do it is clearly not there. I'm back to what I'm saying because there's something in it for me. But when we get to the executive level, the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is someone who's been a stakeholder manager for a long period of his life. He can pull crowds together. Hate him or love him, he's pulled the crowds to win the election. So, but my point is this: you won the election, you're the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Why isn't that their will to say that, look, if I do 4 years, if I do 8 years, I will lead this country in such a way that they'll miss me? It's will. You're a stakeholder manager, so it technically means that people from House of Representatives, the Senate, and let me say MDAs, you're appointing people into MDAs. You have that ability to draw them together into a room and tell them, this is what I want to do. This is why I want it done. So it means you could sell a vision. Why isn't he doing that? It goes back to political will. If you decide that I'm going to surround this country with people who, based on party affiliation, should get roles, it means that you're not using your best level. And if you're not doing that, it's still political will. So are you leveraged by the fact that someone has done a favor for me here and I need to pay it back? Nigeria has one of the most powerful presidents anywhere in the world, because you find out that whoever rules calls the shot. A lot of people take the emphasis to governors, local government. While I hear that, the fish rots from the head. So if I pass down a narrative that, look, we're going to fix this country, everybody that interacts with me must take and imbibe that narrative, because it's my disposition. So they will flow you, I flow them out. Sadly, he hasn't done that. And for me, it's really an issue of political will. That's what it is.
All right, so we'll take it now to the Dangote refinery. If you read the statement that was released by the company yesterday, you see where they were blaming their UPRs in that side. So the company stated that the issue was not with NNPC, but the fact that any PRC is not enforcing the domestic crude allocation as stated by the PIA. So how do you see this whole situation affecting investment, both locally and foreign investments into the country?
I mean, come on, Ibrahim, it goes without saying, that situation is a mission normal. It's an anomaly that should not happen. Alhaji Aliko Dangote decides that, look, let me go and raise capital to build a refinery. Now, let's put it in proper perspective. Why is he doing that? Because we have no refining capacity. It's not as if he's doing this to add to what we had. We virtually had no refining capacity for over a decade. Based on that, NNPC became the sole supplier of PMS. If that is not a monopoly, then tell me what is. And let's go further. It builds this refinery. As a nation, what do we think the advantage of a Dangote refinery is? We should be looking at the fact that means locally we can distill products. We are refining products locally. That is one. Number two, it becomes a beacon to the international agencies that, look, if Alhaji Aliko can do this and it's working and it's getting government support, then let me also try it. We forget that places like the Lekki District Port, Tomarams Group, they are not a local company. But it means that they found something enabling to be able to come and do that. And you need to keep on replicating things like that. You can't build a refinery for 20 billion and then we're having questions on local support. Is he getting crude? These are massive anomalies. It doesn't tell well of the government, but it also will dissuade people. And the Angola example comes into play again. People are taking money from where they can get sweet, light crude, but they're investing in sectors where probably the crude, and I would say the crude might not be as sweet, quote and unquote, but it means that there's a path to an investment there that they see. If they're not seeing that path to investment and they're looking at the Dangote refinery and saying, look, the government has given him, let's say it's giving him some leeway by agreeing with him to build the refinery. But it was a commercial decision. The Dangote refinery does one thing for Nigeria, and I need people to be clear. It moves off of a zero refining capacity to basically an 80 to 85% refining capacity. While the NNPC says that the Port Harcourt refinery will come on stream, that's fine, it's good to say, but until it happens, they've gone around and I'm reading reports saying 12 million liters per day of PMS will come out. That's fine. It helped the regional distribution in that area because the East has suffered a lot in terms of petroleum availability. The part that I'm still hampering on is the fact that if a refinery of 20 billion comes, there should be no conversations around the government did this, the government did this. It should be a function of how do we support this refinery and use it as a pedestal to tell other people that Nigeria is ready for business. That delta of refining capacity, if there's anything we miss in this interview, it doesn't make sense for a refinery that moves us from zero refining capacity to 80 to 85% is having challenges in the federal government. It shouldn't be so. The second thing is this, there's a balance of payment issue here. Every time we go ahead and import petroleum product, we're going to open a letter of credit in foreign exchange. So keep on putting some pressure on the US dollar. The president in his wisdom has rightly, and I'd say rightly, said, okay, give him crude in Naira per liter. But that's his statement. Back to what the Dangote refinery is saying. NNPC hasn't given us, but the NUPRC hasn't enforced. And the question is why? If we know as a country what is metered and what is not metered, and we know at least we can count or estimate what will come out from the floor in terms of crude oil, then it means the mechanism in place, if the NNPC is not doing what they want, they need to sanction them. So what is the role of the NUPRC? To allow NNPC do what they want and just let them get ahead and get away with it because of what their government owned? It's laughable. And the common distinction is giving high-handed, and that's what it is. If you don't get something right as a regulator, I correct you. And if I correct you by talking to you and you don't listen, then I sanction you. So if the cost of the sanction is higher than what you need to do, you would have no incentive other than to do the right thing and make sure it's 350,000 barrels of it. Give it to him. If you've gone ahead to do resource what you call the resource back loan, then you need to go and reassess what you've done.
And the easiest way I keep on saying this is that if you shut in crude oil theft, that is some crude that can back on the table. What Dangote as a refinery so far, sadly, is the same thing other modular refineries have been crying about. But I guess their voice was not loud enough because they looked at this thing from the quantity. So you have Moduro, OPAC is there, a Niger Delta refinery. So you look at it that they've been struggling, but they're not getting the support that they need. And it goes back to what we're saying. A refinery that big, or a local refinery, or a local modular refinery should not be having issues of crude supply because it tells on the government that Nigeria is not ready for it.
The Port Harcourt refinery. We've had deadlines. There was a video of Mr. Mele Kyari, assuring Nigerians that before the end of the administration of the former President Buhari, all the 4 refineries in the country will be working.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, May 2023.
That's correct.
May 2024, nothing. December 2023 was supposed to be when the Port Harcourt refinery was supposed to come alive, and then we heard it was a mechanical commissioning. Now we are getting an August. Yes. This month,
that's what they said.
So we're getting this month as a deadline. Do you have a trust in what you are hearing?
Absolutely not. Let's go back to the boy who cried wolf. He cried wolf so many times that by the time the wolf actually came, nobody else could because he had cried wolf so many times. Mr. Kyari has made statements that for me have been unguarded. Now, if I make a statement as Jide Park and say the refinery will start producing next week, first and foremost, it will be madness for anybody to listen to me. While I've been in the industry for over 2 decades, that's not the point. I don't have the information to say, and I don't have the data to back it. So sadly, what Mr. Mele Kyari has done is that he has put himself and myself in the same boat. The difference is that he has the information. He has the data. So when he comes out on national TV and assures, he shouldn't be saying this from a point of ignorance. He should be saying this based on the fact that he's got the technical reports and knows a best buy date on when these things will happen. If you take your car for oil drain, they'll tell you within 30 minutes to 1 hour and we're done. This is because we've done it so many times and technically that's the time frame. So for Mr. Kyari, where does he get his timelines from? Is it that the week or the day after he makes this public statement, something happens in the refinery and it takes them off target? And if it does, then the question is that you still have that data. Why don't you update the public and say, look, this is no longer going to happen? Because a few things have become spanners in the wheel of progress. This is what we were looking at. But you keep on assuring such a time now has come that nobody's even listening to you again because you've lost credibility. So maybe the question for him is that if you say August, I can almost bet my beard that by August there'll be another issue. Because if you're not already running the refinery as we speak now, to begin to know viability, grade that is coming out, acceptability, then I'm sorry, how did you give us an August date? And what is the premise of that August date? What are you holding on to? Personally, I do not think that it will happen. I will be excited if it does because it solves the problem, like I'm saying, regionally in terms of PMS. But I will tell until then. If
Dangote is already refining diesel and jet fuel, and he has also given us the timeline for when it should be refining petrol.
That's correct.
And with all the issues and challenges that we are seeing and hearing right now, do you think Dangote can also meet up with his petrol refining timeline with all these challenges?
I would say I think he can. And why would I say so? Don't forget that crude can be sourced either locally or he would import it. So maybe what the Dangote refinery has done is that there's an assurance or conversations are ongoing with the government on getting crude locally and in Naira. However, I don't expect the refinery to shut down if they don't hear from the government. Now, they had bought from Brazil, they bought WTI from the US, and I believe they're opening to buying from some African countries as well. So this is the point. I think they'll still meet their PMS date. But I need to be extremely clear. A refinery is set up for one reason. That's to crack crude into distillates. They might also be geared
And if you look at their last set of reports, was it Fitch that did a rating on them?
Sure.
Let me say Fitch was not as optimistic as a lot of people would love to hear, but I mean, a lot of research went into that document. The offshoot of that is that means there's a percentage that they were supposed to get as equity investment from the NNPC, which the NNPC has scaled down to 7%, 7.5%. So Dangote still has, Wildcat still has leverage because they could sell that shares of a refinery that is almost working now, or let me say it's basically working for something that was in construction. So there's more value there. It also means that with that value and with that leverage, then it means that they can continue to buy their crude from wherever in the world it favors them and continue to blend and refine. The impact now on the local is the question. Because when he starts with PMS, it means that if I bring in a cargo from Brazil or WTI and I blend, I'm going to sell it based on my ex-refinery price. And I'm going to sell it in the currency I got that investment in. I hope you're following me.
Yeah.
So if I got that currency investment in the US dollars, then what I'm going to do is have traders come in and pick up on in the US dollar. It's really as simple as that. That's what happened. The impact on the local on the local production, and let me say the local supply situation is where it becomes tricky. Why would I want to get something in US dollars, get an XREF, so and so cents, and then send it in Naira? So the president tried to solve that by saying, no, give him crude in Naira, because that input is a Naira input. So it reduces the dependence on the US dollar. And then what it does for the Dangote refinery is that my input is Naira. I don't need to look for any US dollars. I will produce, get an XREF in Naira per liter, and I'll sell. It's really as simple as that. But the point is that if that doesn't happen based on time or volume or quantity required, then the refiner will shift to where they can cover that gap by importing. And once they import, it will be tough for the government at that point in time to tell them to sell it at the Naira per liter. Those conversations do not come.
Because if you look at the figure that Mr. Wale told us earlier in the week, that $600 million to import petrol into the country, I feel those are the amount of money that can be pushed into making things work for Dangote Refinery and get it locally, and even the modulars.
Ibrahim, you make a very vital point. The coordinating minister of the economy says this is the amount we'll be using to import. So in that same statement, I would have thought that was an opportunity to say that as against bringing out so much foreign exchange, this is what we're going to do to ensure the Dangote Refinery, which is the single largest investment in Nigeria in a long time. This is something that we're going to do to ensure that we reduce. For me, that was the moment he should have taken. And he had the coordinating minister of the economy. So what we don't know, you see weeks ahead. Those are what I thought would have been a few points after that statement. Why are we depending so much on the US dollar in an economy where we don't produce anything? The first thing that we're going to get right in a long period of time is this. And it was private sector led. Support this guy. Let's change this dynamic. It's never going to make sense to get US dollar and go and import petroleum product when you have refining capacity locally here in Nigeria. Come on. How difficult can this thing be? What? No, because I'm not in government.
It might probably be because you're not in government. So lastly, before we wrap up, we've talked about all the various challenges and it won't, but we've just focused on challenges and not opportunities. So how do you think we can navigate all these challenges in the country's energy sector and make it profitable to invest in?
That sadly is going to be not a short-term solution. Perception, they say, is often larger than reality. So it means that if I have cash and I want to invest in somewhere, you can never get 100% perfect scenario, but I need pointers or feelers to tell me that if I put this money here, I see this curve to make my margins and come out. If it's unclear, then what happens is that I'm going to go somewhere else. The PIA, sadly, has not given us the closure we need in terms of transparency in the oil and gas industry. The president and his team seem to be fighting one fire. They're almost dousing it. And then there's another one. Remember when they came up with I believe it was Executive Order 40, which was where the president was saying that, look, let us encourage and change the fiscal policies around non-associated gas oil and not non-associated gas extraction. I mean, look at that policy now. Brilliant policy, in my opinion. But what has happened since then? Getting approvals, is it slower? Is it faster? If you say that tax release and tax rebates are for a certain period, then it also means that you said you'd increase the window or the capacity, or let me say the contract size, and then extend the timing. So it means that if I had to come every year for an approval, now I don't need to do it every 5 years. If the limit for oil and gas operations was $1 million, you're now saying it's about $10 million. But what has been the effect? And someone needs to tell us all the moments, like, since we did this, these are the things that have come in as investment. So we're measuring it. It means that this particular policy, this is what we put it out for. This is where it has taken us to. That needs to happen. There needs to be more transparency. NNPC needs to be freed up to go the route of corporate governance. Because you see, this affiliation with Aso Rock is not helping anybody. Let's put in a proper management team. But the first thing is to audit that organization. There needs to be a forensic audit. Let's look at what NNPC has done over the last 48 years. These are the things that we need to stop, and these are the things we need to continue. If that doesn't happen, because that is the body that sells oil and gas to the world for Nigeria, from Nigeria's point of view. If that organization or reorganization doesn't happen, if the transparency, these are the audited accounts of the 21 entities, this is where we are. Let someone sit down and look at this thing as a forensic audit and say, okay, these are the recommendations. This recommendation is from a place of, we've not run it well. These are the things we need to do to run it better. That's one. A lot of goes around renewable energy, and I think we've talked about that. How can we backward integrate? Those are some of the things that also are quick wins. The president and his team on CNG initiative, in my opinion, seem to be doing okay. But I found out also, and I stand to be corrected, they're holding back now in terms of details. If you say that I want 2 million cars, for instance, to have been converted to CNG by next year, the question I keep on asking them, that's brilliant and that's fine. What have you done from last year to now? Give us actual numbers. Don't put us in a ball where we have to guess. If you look at CNG outlets, mother stations, NNPC has done about 12. Greenville is doing a few. NIPCO is doing a few. But I mean, where is the space for conversations and actual quick wins with Meman and Malta? So, Meman used to be more one in the past. Yeah. I haven't driven around any of those stations where they're doing CNG. Probably because first they were not built for CNG. But there's some quick conversions that you can do when it comes to CNG. Why are we having conversations in terms of pipelines or how much CNG has been piped from what location to what location? Some states are using solar for their tricycles. Some are using CNG. But there needs to be more conversation that is data-driven. What they're doing is good. And you find out that the more they do it with clear timelines and visibility and transparency, you also find out that we take pressure off public transportation. Because people will only move from point A to point B today by petrol. So if petrol price continues to go up, it has a trigger effect on everything else. When you move food from one farm to the other, if you're doing it by petrol or diesel, that's still a high cost. How do we get CNG into those places? Security. Before we talk about investments in oil and gas or anything, we are not feeding well in Nigeria because sometimes we don't have good yield. And it's down to insecurity. So what is the president doing and his team? What are they saying to say that, look, this initiative has gone live. These are the kind of bases that we're putting around farming areas. Do we want to begin to pull farming areas together so that yield in a certain space is controlled? Put processing around those things so that, things like tomato, that for every 10 tomato you get out of the ground, probably 4 or 5 gets bad. Are we processing it? Are we freezing it with cold rooms? These are things that I think the president and his team need to not be loose on, but to give us actual data. This is what we've done year to year. How much has been saved on subsidy month of month? It's not okay for Mr. Bagbudu to come on national TV and say that the money that we saved from subsidy is what we're using. I'm sorry, no, you don't just say that off the whiff. Your budget and national planning, so for what it's worth, you should be showing us data that says this is how much was saved in January, February, March. This is where we disbursed it to. These are the outcomes. We can't run Nigeria the way we've been running it and expect better progress. I'm sorry, it's not going to work. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it. Sadly, we've been insane for too long. But we need to move towards sanity. We need to move towards data. Check the quick wins, because everybody's eye is still on Nigeria. It's more than us to say it's an investment destination. Let us prove it.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an insightful conversation from power to oil and gas to renewables. Any last word? Do you have anything?
The last word this is for when you're about to die. But I'm someone who lived basically all my life in Nigeria. I personally am not going anywhere. But the point is this, the government needs to make it easy for people who are doing business on their own, people who go to work, and people who are children and are looking towards the future. The Jacques syndrome came about because people just got tired. Once you lose hope, you go, and that's the worst thing that can happen to anybody. So they need to bring back that hope. They need to cut down the profligacy in spending. The government is spending money as if we're doing 2.5 billion barrels a day of crude oil, and we're not. The president needs to surround himself around people who are not afraid to tell him the truth. The worst is, okay, your services are no longer. Well, for crying out loud, everybody in this country needs to get a conscience. You can't keep on spending money as if it's going out of fashion, and then people are looking for food to eat. I think a paradigm shift needs to happen, and transparency, accountability, and integrity for me are the watchwords that we need to use to trigger that.
Well, this is a renewed up administration. So, yeah.
I hate that when the president keeps on saying renewed hope. While we hope, I just haven't seen the nexus between what you promised and what you really.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all good. We look up to Babato.
That's the ultimate effort.
You get us.
Thank you very much for talking to me.